Okay, welcome back. This is Dr. Matthew J. Traum. This is video number 2 of lecture 3 of the engineering design course. We've just taken a break from our first 7-minute video, and now we're ready to start the second video. This is the slide that we ended on last time, Jones's design process structure. And just to remind you, we're talking about simple engineering design processes that have been suggested by various experts throughout the history of engineering design. And I'll go back one slide just for a moment to remind you, this is the structure of the 4-stage design process model, which is the first one suggested in the course textbook. And this one doesn't actually have a physical structure, but it only has 3 elements, 3 stages. So I selected this one because it was essentially the most simple of the various design processes that is described in our textbook. So there's 3 stages: analysis, which is the listing of all design requirements and the reduction of these to a complete set of logically related performance specifications. So that's the step where you would work with a customer to define the customer needs. A lot of times customer needs are qualitative, so you would try to figure out a way to make them quantitative so that you can measure how effective your solutions are in a quantitative way against the design requirements. And you're also in the analysis step looking for design constraints, so things that would prevent the design from going in a certain direction because of some realistic constraint. So the second step in the Jones design process structure is synthesis. Synthesis is finding possible solutions for each individual performance specification and building up complete designs from these with the least possible compromise. So that is the brainstorming process where you essentially open your mind and try to come up with every possible solution that addresses the needs of the design problem, and then try to figure out how each and every one of those design metrics, those customer needs that you define in the analysis step, is addressed by one of the solutions that you come up with during synthesis. And then the third step in this process structure is evaluation. And that's evaluating the efficacy of the alternative designs to fulfill the performance requirements for operation, manufacture, and sales before final design is selected. So, excuse me, that's the process of down selection. So using the quantitative metrics that you established based on customer needs and design constraints in the analysis step to down select from among all of the possible solutions that you came up with in the synthesis step to what is effectively the best solution to meet that particular design challenge. So that's the evaluation step. And notice Jones's design process structure does not have a final step, the communication step. That's the step where you actually communicate to the person who's creating the artifact or the object that you've designed. That's absent. Just because it's not there doesn't mean that when you're done with this particular process you don't have to do that. But I did again select this one because it was the most simple. There's really only 3 steps in this process structure. So that's one example. Here's an example of another one. This is Archer's 3-phase design process model. This one is a little bit more complex in that, like Jones before in the previous slide, Archer has essentially 3 phases. So an analytical phase, a creative phase, and an executive phase. And within those 3 phases, Archer has sub-activities. So programming, data collection, analysis, synthesis, development, communication. And just like we saw in that simple 4-step model that I showed 2 slides back, there is sort of an implied direction here, which is that this process goes from the top downwards to the bottom. But again, as we've discussed now several times, the engineering design process is nonlinear and non-hierarchical. So there is a kind of an implied flexibility even in this process model that even though the general direction of the process is from the top down to the bottom, that you can go backwards in the opposite direction as you need to, as your knowledge and expertise grows as you're solving the design problem. So over here in green, I have some sort of just descriptive words that describe what it is that you're doing in these phases of the design process. So in the analytical phase, you are observing, measuring, and using inductive reasoning, essentially, again, to understand what the design constraints are and what the customer needs are, and to quantify them as much as possible so that you can use them later on in a down selection process to evaluate how well each of your solutions meets those needs, those design needs. So it's important to have those in place before you do anything else. Second, here in the creative phase, we have evaluation, judgment, deductive reasoning, and decision making. And again, the creative phase is the process of brainstorming all of the possible solutions that could potentially become the solution that you use to solve your particular design problem. So in the creative phase, there's analysis, synthesis, and development. And so this is essentially brainstorming and then down selecting those brainstorm ideas to the ones that are viable, and then applying the metrics that you develop during the analytical phase to focus on developing one or maybe two of those solutions for additional work, additional prototyping. And then in the executive phase, there's communication. So this is absent from the Jones model in the previous slide, but it was part of the 4-step process that I showed 2 slides back. The executive phase, which involves communication, is essentially description, translation, and transmission. So what you're doing here is creating a means of communicating how to fabricate this object, this artifact that you've designed to solve the design problem for the person ultimately who is going to be fabricating or manufacturing it. So this model is slightly more complex than Jones's model, but again, it is still one of the simpler models that describes how the design process works. Okay. I am right up at 7 minutes, so I'm going to pause here again. This is the end of video 2, and we will pick up video 3 after you take a little break. So see you in a few moments.